Okay, so my name's Nicola MacDonald and I am a mindfulness coach. But I'm going to talk about postpartum anxiety today because I just think it's such an important topic and it's not talked about enough. I think people think that it's a weakness to admit it if you have it, when actually it's a real strength to admit it and talk about it. So I was always a worrier from a teenager upwards, but when I had my son, it spiraled out of control. I felt very alone, which I think is quite natural for a first-time parent, because you're just a fountain of giving. All the time, 24/7 pretty much, you're giving and using up lots of energy doing that, and that's part of what happens when you have a baby. It just meant that I wasn't nourishing myself enough. I wasn't kind to myself, and I started believing stories in my head that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't a good enough mum. I wasn't a good enough wife. I wasn't a good enough friend. I felt like I was half present in conversations, not really listening, half listening. And I just felt inadequate, and I felt like the world was judging me and that I was just alone. And my heart ached for love and acceptance, but I didn't realise that really. I just felt pretty awful. And my brain was judging. I was on a sort of judgmental loop. It's a horrible process because you just feel like you add more stories to the tale that you're not good enough. So sort of the core belief is I'm not a good enough mum. And then everything around you cements that in your head. So you might get a look from a stranger, or you might get a comment from a stranger that may be completely innocent. But when you feel really low, you take it so personally, and sleep deprivation doesn't help either, because it just makes you overanalyze even more, and you're more emotional, which is just natural. But yes, so I was creating these stories in my head, and I didn't admit it to anyone. I didn't tell my family. I didn't even tell my husband that I was struggling. I mean, he knew I was a worrier anyway, but I think it just got out of hand. I had horrendous night terrors, which I've had in the past, so in that way it wasn't completely alien to me to have a night terror, but it was to do with my child, and I thought someone was going to take him away. I think that was my key worry about telling anyone, was that I don't know, someone might then tell a health visitor, and then the health visitor might get involved, and I was just paranoid, completely paranoid, that someone was going to take away my son from me, even though I was actually a good mum. I was doing everything I needed to do to keep my son happy. I just didn't believe it in my head, and it took going to the GP and admitting casually, oh, I've been struggling a bit, I've had a few night terrors, and for them to listen. And I was lucky because I had a good GP, and he said, let's put you into talking therapies. So via the NHS, I went along to a stress and anxiety course, which was good. I sat with other people in a room. We didn't talk about our personal experiences. You just sat and listened to others, which was great. But then I realised also that there's a lot of people out there who are anxious. I just had, mine was more related to my son at that point. Anyway, I then discovered mindfulness, and I haven't looked back. It really, really helped me. It helped me realise that these stories in my head are merely stories, that thoughts come and go, that they're not real, and they're not you. And that was a big thing for me to understand, that I don't have to believe these stories in my head. And that's what I was doing, because I was so tired as well. It's hard to, to figure out what's going on up there because it's all muddy and foggy. And so I realise there's an element of it probably coming again if I have another child, but I'll be more aware this time when these stories start to come in that I'm not good enough mum. Because of mindfulness, I'll be more aware of it. Because mindfulness helps you also to live in the present moment, which is great. So you're not thinking about the future. So with anxiety, you're on this sort of heightened state of alert, thinking, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's happening in an hour? Is my child going to sleep? Will I sleep? Have I fed them enough? All these worries, and they're related to the future, when actually the mindfulness helps you to live in the present moment. So learning to accept that right now my baby is sleeping and this is my time to relax. And I don't have to worry about what happens tomorrow because tomorrow is tomorrow. And then impermanence is another big thing with mindfulness. So understanding that things change all the time. So even in the hardest moments, even in those moments at night where you're up in the night time and time again and your baby won't calm down, it won't sleep, and you're thinking, please, please, I just want some sleep. They will change. Things change. And every day is different. And that's something I've learned with parenting as well. Every day is different and children are unpredictable. And that's the lovely thing about it. And you sort of learn to accept that things are changing all the time. So that's another thing with mindfulness, impermanence, which makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you don't need to control so much because there's only so much you can control anyway. Learning to let go. And then the judgmental side was huge with mindfulness. So with mindfulness, it's about non-judgmental awareness. So just noticing more when these thoughts come into your head, and that's via meditation and other techniques. And then not judging yourself for it so harshly. So not saying to yourself, oh, I'm worrying about this again, and why am I still thinking about the past, and why am I worrying about the future, and oh, I wish I could just let go. And you learn to stop doing that so much. I mean, we're all human, so from time to time things like that will happen, but with mindfulness you learn to be kinder to yourself and to judge yourself less. And that is wonderful, because the kinder you are to yourself, the kinder you can be to others. And I know that the more I nourish myself in various ways, not just via mindfulness, the better I feel, funnily enough, and the more I can nourish my family. But you just don't realise that as a new parent in particular, I think. You put enormous pressure on yourself to be everything. I thought I had to have a nutritious meal on the table every night without fail for my husband, because I wasn't working, and I'd worked, from school age upwards. I'd worked, from uni upwards, in fact. And I couldn't grasp the fact that he might actually just be happy to figure something out for himself for dinner, and he's not going to hate me because I haven't provided a meal. And he never made me feel like I needed to provide the meal. This was all in my head, thinking I had to have the house clean. I had to be the perfect wife in every way, so the house had to be spotless, and I had to be present for him in every way and listen to it. And it's actually, I just needed to accept that this was a tough process and to let go, and the house does not need to be spotless, and all these things, all these worries that pop in. And I think social media doesn't help in some ways, and social media can help in other ways, in that you hear from other mums that they're having a tough day, and it makes you think, oh, it's not just me. But in other ways, you see all the pictures that they're posting of their lovely times, and that then creates more stories in your head that you're not doing these things for your child. And that's not nice for you either. So I think being aware of how social media can affect you is a good thing too. There are lots of things that I've learned from mindfulness, but the reason that I wanted to make this was to talk about postpartum anxiety and how I felt during that time, and that there are ways to come out of it. And for me, mindfulness was the thing. But I think if it's not your thing, then opening up to people is is a good start, and going to your GP if you don't feel comfortable telling your friends and family. They will help you. And if you don't get any help with the first GP, go to the next GP, because someone will help you within the NHS and give you the support you need. And going to baby groups might help too. Well, they helped me. Anyway, I just wanted to make this about postpartum anxiety, to share how I experienced it and how I got through it. And I just hope it will help other people. Thank you.